For decades, humanity had looked at the stars with curiosity and wonder. People gazed at the night sky, wondering if anyone else was out there, if there were other civilizations, other lives, other minds like theirs. Most thought the universe was vast, lonely and silent, and for the most part that was true. But then something changed, something that would wake humanity from its quiet observation and force it to consider its place in the galaxy in a way it never had before. It started with a signal, faint and broken, traveling through the darkness of space. At first, it was almost impossible to detect. It wasn't a smooth message, not a clear sentence, not even a coherent pattern. It was a desperate call for help, buried beneath static and interference from a million cosmic sources. Scientists at observatories noticed it by accident, their instruments picking up fluctuations in a frequency that shouldn't have carried any meaningful signal at all. At first, they thought it was noise, a random distortion in the data. But then they analyzed it further, and the truth became terrifyingly clear. Someone, or something, was asking for help. The message was simple in meaning, but urgent in feeling. A civilization far from Earth, peaceful and unsuspecting, was facing destruction. The details were scattered and fragmented. Some parts described attacks, others described fear, and some seemed almost like cries pleading for someone to notice before it was too late. Humanity had never sent help to another world. Until now, people had spoken of exploration, of learning, of science, of curiosity, but not of intervention. This was different. This was life or death for a species they had never met. The first reaction on Earth was disbelief. Governments, scientists, and military leaders questioned whether the signal was real. Could it be a hoax? Could it be a trap? The idea that humanity might be asked to intervene in the affairs of another species, across unimaginable distances, seemed impossible. And yet, the more experts studied the signal, the more certain they became. Someone somewhere was truly in need, and the evidence was undeniable. There was no doubt. A civilization's survival depended on the response of a species they hadn't even met. The world outside the government labs remained oblivious. The media caught wind of unusual observations in space, but the public only saw vague reports of unexplained signals. People joked about aliens, of course, as they always did. Memes were made, conspiracy theories spread, and social media buzzed with wild speculation. But in secret rooms behind the scenes, people who understood the reality were preparing. Humanity might have been young in the galaxy, but it had grown intelligent, resourceful, and determined. It could rise to this challenge if it chose to. Within Earth's intelligence and space programs, discussions were urgent and serious. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked side by side, analyzing the signal for clues about the source, the danger, and the technology of the civilization in need. Every detail mattered: the type of star system, the estimated population, the energy readings. They tried to calculate the speed of any approaching threat, to determine how much time they had. Each calculation brought a mixture of hope and dread. Time was short, and failure was unthinkable. Outside these rooms, the world went on as usual. Cities bustled, planes flew overhead, and people lived their lives unaware that a message from the stars had shaken humanity to its core. It was a strange contrast, the calm normalcy of everyday life against the urgency of a galactic-scale emergency. Some of the people working on the signal had families, friends, and routines that they clung to, as if normal life could keep the fear at bay. Others barely slept, consumed by the calculations, simulations, and what-ifs. There was a sense of both pride and terror. For the first time, humanity was being called upon to act in the larger universe, and there was no manual, no precedent, nothing to guide them but their own ingenuity. Debates raged among those with power to act. Some argued that Earth was not ready for such responsibility. Humanity was young, untested, and alone in a universe where failure could mean death. They worried that intervention might invite retaliation from unknown forces or provoke conflict that humans could not win. Others argued that to ignore the plea would be a moral failure. How could they turn away from a civilization that had no way to defend itself? How could they refuse to act when lives were at stake simply because the stakes were enormous? The discussion was heated, tense, and filled with uncertainty. But one thing became clear: inaction was not an option for those who understood the truth. While these discussions unfolded, the aliens themselves continued to send signals, fragmented and distorted as if calling into the void, hoping anyone would respond. They had no way of knowing that Earth was listening, that a species far younger than theirs was already debating what to do. They assumed no one would come. They had lived under threat for years, hiding, adapting, hoping for some unknown savior that they barely believed existed. Their messages carried not just facts but emotion, fear, desperation, hope. And that emotion was what struck the humans analyzing the signals the most. For those working to decode the messages, it became personal. They were no longer dealing with abstract data or theoretical threats. They were dealing with lives, with families, with a civilization at risk. The human mind has always responded to stories and emotions, and as the signal unfolded, it became clear. This was a story of survival that called for action. People who had spent their lives building telescopes, satellites, and spacecraft suddenly understood the stakes in a way they never had before. It was no longer science alone, it was responsibility, courage, and empathy. The first proposals were modest. Small unmanned probes, warning messages, or observations were suggested, but the people in charge quickly realized that the threat to this civilization was immediate and immense. If humanity wanted to make a difference, it would need to act decisively and directly. They began to sketch out plans for a fleet, unlike anything Earth had ever attempted. Ships that could travel farther, faster, and endure more than anything built for exploration or commerce. Ships that could carry people willing to face danger, to stand between an aggressor and a civilization that had never asked for help but desperately needed it. In laboratories and workshops across the world, engineers and designers started working day and night. Each part, each system, each calculation mattered. They tested engines, communication systems, and defenses. Simulations ran constantly, predicting scenarios, testing strategies, and measuring the risks. Every decision was debated, revised, and tested again. The pressure was enormous, but so was the determination. Humanity was not going to fail, not this time, not when someone else's lives depended on them. At the same time, the humans preparing for this mission were aware of the personal cost. Many knew that they might not return, that their families might never see them again. They trained rigorously, not only for the technical challenges but for the emotional and mental ones as well. The weight of responsibility was crushing, yet there was also a quiet pride in knowing that they were part of something larger than themselves. Something historic, something that could change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. And so, humanity began to move, quietly, carefully, but with purpose. A species that had observed the stars from a distance for millennia was finally ready to step forward, to intervene, to prove that it could act when others might only watch. The first step had been taken, not across space but in the decision to act at all. The world outside remained largely unaware of what was happening. People went about their lives imagining that Earth was a small, insignificant blue planet, quietly orbiting its star. But hidden from view, people were building, planning, and preparing. The message from the stars had awakened something in humanity that had lain dormant for centuries. A willingness to face the unknown, to shoulder responsibility, and to risk everything for the sake of others. By the time the preparations had begun in earnest, one thing was already clear to those involved. This was no longer a test of technology or strategy alone. It was a test of character, of courage, of the very essence of what it meant to be human. They would soon discover that when the stakes are highest, humanity is capable of extraordinary things, things that even the universe itself might not expect. The signal continued to come, faint but persistent, carrying its plea for help through the endless void. And for the first time in recorded history, humanity answered, not with hesitation, not with doubt, but with resolve. No one could yet know what would happen next, what dangers awaited, or whether the effort would succeed. But one thing was certain. Humanity had chosen to act, and that choice would echo across the stars in ways no one could imagine. Even as Earth quietly began its preparations, the rest of the galaxy watched with skepticism. Aliens who had been monitoring humanity for centuries could not believe the idea that humans might actually respond to a call for help. In many worlds, humans were considered insignificant, a young species with limited reach, slow technology, and little understanding of the larger universe. The common belief was that if a civilization in danger sent a call, Earth would remain silent, just as it had for thousands of years. They thought humans would observe from a distance, perhaps record the signal, maybe study it but never act. Within those alien circles, debates were loud and confident. Even if they hear it, they will not act, one leader said. They are too inexperienced, too small, and too cautious. It is the way of humans. They look, they study, they hesitate. Another alien argued, perhaps we underestimate them. But how could they possibly launch a fleet to a system so far away? It is impossible. Their words carried certainty, and yet underneath it was a subtle thread of curiosity. What would humans do? Would they simply remain observers as expected? Or could they surprise the galaxy? Back on Earth, the reality was very different from the aliens' assumptions. Humans were far from complacent. In secret facilities and hidden labs, engineers, scientists, and military planners worked together in ways they had never done before. Usually their work was divided. One group focused on space exploration, another on defense, another on communications. Now, for the first time, all of those skills merged into one purpose. Every system, every tool, and every idea was considered through the lens of saving another civilization. They debated every detail, the speed of ships, the strength of their defenses, the energy needed to cross vast distances, and how to communicate with a species that had never met humans before. The discussions were long, intense, and sometimes heated. Some argued that the mission should be cautious, sending only observation craft to assess the situation. Others insisted that a bold approach was necessary, sending a fleet capable of acting immediately to protect the endangered civilization. Slowly, a plan began to form. It would be unlike anything humanity had ever done. It was risky, ambitious, and dangerous, but those who worked on it were not afraid of risk. They were afraid of failure. They understood that hesitation could mean the extinction of an innocent civilization. As the preparations moved forward, a small number of people outside the military and scientific world became aware of the mission. They were leaders, strategists, and visionaries, trusted with the knowledge of what Earth was planning. They watched, studied, and contributed ideas. Some volunteered for roles that carried extreme danger, knowing that their skills might be needed in the far reaches of space. Every person involved understood the stakes. This was not a mission for recognition or fame. It was a mission for survival, for responsibility, and for the demonstration of what humanity could accomplish when it chose to act. Meanwhile, the alien civilizations continued to discuss Earth with disbelief. They had studied humans for centuries and had cataloged their behaviors, their strengths, and their weaknesses. They had concluded that humans would never take such bold action. Many saw Earth as passive, a planet more likely to hide than to stand against a threat. They assumed that if someone needed help, Earth would remain silent as it had done in their observations of other galactic events. And yet, there was a growing uncertainty among some of them. A few began to question their assumptions. Could it be possible that humans were capable of unexpected courage? That they might act despite their small size and relative inexperience? On Earth, those who worked on the mission had no time for doubt. Each day brought new problems, new calculations, and new tests. Engineers designed propulsion systems capable of faster-than-ever travel. Communication experts developed ways to send and receive messages across light years, and military strategists simulated battle scenarios to prepare for the unknown. It was exhausting work, but the team never wavered. Each person understood the enormity of the task and the consequences of failure. Sleep was short, meals were brief, and personal comforts were forgotten. They were building not just ships, but hope. The mission also required emotional resilience. Those chosen for the fleet would leave their families and friends behind, knowing they might never return. They trained not only physically but mentally, preparing for isolation, danger, and the weight of responsibility. They learned to rely on one another, to trust completely because there would be no room for mistakes. Every decision could mean life or death, not just for themselves but for the civilization they were racing to protect. Despite the secrecy, some parts of the world began to notice unusual activity. Satellite launches, new construction in remote areas, and strange energy readings sparked curiosity and speculation. Yet governments moved quickly to maintain secrecy, understanding that fear or misunderstanding could disrupt the mission before it even began. Only those directly involved knew the full scope of the operation. For everyone else, life went on, and the world continued in its normal rhythm, unaware of the monumental effort unfolding beyond their view. As time passed, the preparations became more sophisticated. Humans built vessels designed to withstand extreme conditions, From radiation and micrometeoroids to the pressures of deep space travel, they developed advanced communication networks to maintain contact across vast distances. Every detail, no matter how small, was tested and retested. Teams ran endless simulations, practicing scenarios where the fleet might encounter hostile forces, technical failures, or unexpected dangers. It was a careful, relentless preparation that demanded every ounce of skill, patience, and ingenuity humanity had to offer. The human fleet was not just machines. It was people. Scientists, pilots, engineers, and strategists formed crews who would become the living heart of the mission. They learned to work together under pressure, to anticipate each other's actions, and to make life or death decisions instantly. In many ways, the human spirit became the fleet's greatest weapon. Aliens might underestimate technology or numbers, but they could not predict human adaptability, courage, or determination. Meanwhile, the civilization sending the SOS remained unaware that help was on the way. They had grown used to waiting, used to fearing that no one would respond. Years of attacks and threats had left them cautious, fearful, and skeptical. They had begun to believe that the universe was indifferent, that their plight would go unnoticed, that hope was a luxury they could no longer afford. Each message they sent was more desperate than the last, carrying emotion as much as information, a plea into the vast darkness, hoping against hope that someone would come. And then quietly, humanity began its response. At first, it was invisible, unnoticed even by other civilizations. Humans sent probes, conducted scans, and prepared the fleet. But the decision had been made. They would act, and they would act decisively. Unlike what the galaxy expected, humans were not waiting for perfect conditions or consensus. They were moving, stepping into the unknown, guided by responsibility, empathy, and courage. The world had rarely seen such determination, even among its own people. The fleet represented not just technology, but a commitment, a promise that life, no matter where it existed, mattered. Some of the alien observers began to notice subtle signs of this preparation. Unexplained energy bursts, anomalies in signals, and movement in human-controlled space regions hinted that something significant was happening. Those who noticed were shocked, confused, and even a little afraid. Could it be possible that humans were preparing for something no one thought they could do? Could the small blue planet really act where other civilizations hesitated? The idea seemed impossible, yet the evidence grew undeniable. Back on Earth, the people building the fleet remained focused. There was little room for doubt, little time for hesitation. Every day was consumed with testing, refining, and improving. Every system, every crew member, and every plan was examined, challenged, and perfected. Mistakes were corrected immediately, lessons were learned, and progress continued relentlessly. Those involved understood that this was more than a mission. It was a turning point for humanity, a chance to step into a larger universe and make a difference where none had expected it. The day would soon come when the fleet would be ready to launch. Until then, the work continued. Each person involved understood that this moment was unprecedented. Never before had humanity acted so boldly, so far from home, and for a purpose that transcended its own survival. They prepared not for glory, but for the unknown, for responsibility, and for the hope of saving lives they might never meet. In quiet rooms and busy workshops, in control centers and simulation labs, humanity waited, prepared, and trained. They were readying themselves for a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew. The galaxy doubted them. The civilization in danger hoped against hope. And Earth, silent to the wider universe, was ready to act. For the first time, humans were not observers. They were participants in a story larger than themselves, a story that would change not only the lives of those they intended to save, but also the way the galaxy saw them forever. The decisions had been made. The plans were in place. The fleet would launch and humanity would finally answer the call. The fleet was finally ready. After months of preparation, testing, and endless planning, humanity was about to take its first step into the unknown. The ships stood like giants, sleek and powerful, each one carrying the hopes, skills, and courage of countless people who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They were designed to endure what no human had ever faced before, to travel distances that seemed impossible, and to confront dangers that no one could predict. Yet despite all the technology and calculations, the most important element of the fleet was the humans themselves, the people who would guide it, maintain it, and live through the journey. As the crew members prepared for launch, there was a mixture of excitement and fear. Many had spent their lives dreaming about space, imagining what it would be like to see other worlds, to travel beyond Earth. Now those dreams were real, but they carried a weight they had never anticipated. Each person understood the dangers. They knew that they were leaving the safety of home, leaving behind family, friends, and everything familiar. They knew that once they crossed certain distances, help would not come from Earth. Every decision they made could have consequences far beyond themselves. Yet there was no hesitation. Courage and determination outweighed fear. The fleet lifted off with quiet power, engines burning with energy designed to propel them faster and farther than any previous human craft. People on Earth watched in silence, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The ships disappeared into the vastness of space, leaving behind their home planet, which now seemed small and fragile in comparison to the infinite darkness ahead. The crew adjusted to zero gravity, checked systems, and began the long journey. Even in the early hours, they faced unexpected challenges, minor malfunctions, communication delays, and the psychological strain of leaving the familiar behind. As the fleet moved farther from Earth, the sense of isolation grew. Stars stretched across the black void, beautiful and awe-inspiring, but also reminders of how distant and vulnerable humans were in this journey. Some crew members spent hours observing the cosmos, marveling at its scale, the beauty of distant planets, and the subtle glow of nebulae. Others focused on their duties, monitoring propulsion systems, energy levels, and life support, knowing that even a small error could be catastrophic. Despite the tension, there was a shared sense of purpose. Every human on board understood that they were not just traveling for themselves. They carried the responsibility of protecting an entire civilization they had never met. Challenges came quickly. Space travel at such speeds is unforgiving. Micrometeoroids, cosmic radiation, and fluctuating energy fields tested both the ships and the crew. Each incident demanded quick thinking and adaptability. When a minor meteor shower damaged a communication array, engineers worked tirelessly to repair it while the fleet continued its journey. When a propulsion system showed irregular readings, pilots adjusted trajectories with precision that had been honed over months of simulation and training. Every obstacle highlighted the ingenuity and resilience of humans, traits that alien civilizations had underestimated. The psychological pressures were just as intense as the technical ones. Isolation, constant vigilance, and the weight of responsibility affected every crew member differently. Some found solace in routines, monitoring systems, running simulations, or journaling their thoughts. Others formed small support groups, sharing stories, hopes, and fears. Leadership on the fleet was crucial, balancing the need for discipline with compassion. Captains and officers encouraged teamwork, reminding the crew that no one could face the journey alone. Trust and coordination became not just useful, but essential for survival. Even as the fleet traveled, the crew began to understand the scale of what they were doing. Distances were measured in light years, times in months and years. Communication with Earth was delayed, sometimes by hours, sometimes by days, depending on their location. There would be no immediate support in emergencies. Every decision had to be final, yet flexible enough to adapt to the unexpected. In this environment, human creativity and judgment were as vital as any engine or weapon. Each crew member carried not just their training, but the combined ingenuity of humanity. One of the most difficult challenges was maintaining morale. Being confined in the fleet's compartments, surrounded by metal and machinery for days and nights without the comfort of natural surroundings, tested even the strongest minds. Crew members found ways to support each other, sharing meals, telling stories, playing small games, or simply talking through fears and uncertainties. Simple acts of human connection became vital. It reminded everyone that no matter how far from Earth they traveled, they were still human with emotions, hopes, and the ability to care for one another. Meanwhile, the alien civilizations observing Earth continued to be skeptical. They had expected hesitation, delays, and retreat. Yet now, subtle signs of activity reached them. Unexplained energy emissions, unusual movements in human-controlled regions of space, and minor shifts in communication patterns. Some of the more cautious aliens began to whisper doubts among themselves. Could humans really be preparing for action? Could they actually send ships across such enormous distances to intervene in another civilization's struggle? Even as doubt spread, the dominant belief remained that humans were inexperienced and would ultimately falter. As the fleet crossed deeper into space, it began to encounter phenomena that no simulation had fully prepared them for. Unexpected cosmic storms, gravitational anomalies, and magnetic fields affected navigation systems and communication arrays. Each problem required immediate solutions, creative thinking, and teamwork. The fleet's human crews adapted quickly, adjusting strategies and improvising solutions on the fly. It was in these moments that the unique qualities of humanity, curiosity, persistence, and adaptability, shone brightest. While technology was essential, it was human judgment that kept the mission moving forward. The journey also offered moments of awe. Crew members witnessed sights that had never been seen by human eyes. Distant galaxies swirling with light, stars being born in cosmic nurseries, and planets glowing with unfamiliar colors. For a brief time, these moments reminded the crew of why they had chosen to explore, why they had volunteered for this journey, and why they had dedicated their lives to the mission. Even amidst danger and pressure, the beauty of the universe inspired them, strengthening their resolve and reminding them of the importance of their mission. Despite the awe and inspiration, there was also tension. The fleet had to be ready for the unknown. Alien civilizations, potentially hostile, could encounter them at any time. They had no way of knowing what awaited them near the SOS signal. Every crew member understood that their actions could determine the survival of an entire species. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it also motivated them. Fear was present, but it was balanced by purpose. Each human understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Communication between ships became a lifeline. The fleet's systems allowed real-time coordination, strategic planning, and morale support. Captains shared observations, engineers offered solutions, and crews checked on each other constantly. It was a network not just of machines, but of people, minds, and hearts working together. The human capacity for collaboration and empathy became as essential as any engine or weapon. These bonds, formed under pressure and necessity, would define the fleet as much as the technology it carried. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The journey continued, each moment bringing new challenges and discoveries. The crew faced exhaustion, isolation, and uncertainty, but they also grew stronger, more confident, and more skilled. Each obstacle they overcame strengthened their belief in themselves and their mission. They were no longer just traveling to help another civilization. They were proving to themselves and to the galaxy that humans could rise to challenges greater than any they had faced before. As the fleet drew closer to the SOS signal, anticipation built. The unknown loomed large. They had trained, prepared, and adapted, but nothing could fully predict what awaited them. The civilization in danger did not yet know that help was coming. The aliens who monitored Earth still doubted humanity's capabilities. And yet, the humans pressed on, driven by determination, compassion, and the courage to act when no one else might. Every member of the fleet understood that the coming days would be decisive. The first encounter, the first contact, and the first challenges would test not just their skills, but their humanity. It was a moment where science, technology, courage, and empathy would converge. The journey had already proven that humans could endure and adapt. What lay ahead would determine if they could succeed where the galaxy least expected them to. And so, the fleet moved onward, cutting through the darkness of space, carrying the hopes and fears of countless beings, both human and alien. Each person on board felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of purpose. They were no longer just explorers. They were guardians, pioneers, and protectors. They were humanity at its boldest, stepping into the unknown to face danger, to confront the impossible, and to act when no one else might. Every mile traveled brought them closer to the unknown. Every system checked, every challenge of. After months of travel, the fleet finally approached the system from which the distress signal had originated. The emptiness of space had given way to the glow of distant suns and planets, their lights reflecting in the eyes of those on board the ships. Excitement mixed with tension as everyone prepared for what could be the most dangerous part of the mission. The first contact. The crew had trained for simulations, calculated trajectories, and considered every possible scenario, but the reality of facing a civilization in danger and the unknown alien forces threatening it was far more intense than any exercise could prepare them for. As they drew closer, the fleet's sensors picked up signs of activity. Small settlements and cities on the planet showed evidence of life, structures carefully designed but vulnerable. Energy signatures indicated that the civilization was trying to defend itself, setting up barriers and weaponry in whatever limited way they could. The humans realized the danger they were stepping into. The aggressors responsible for the distress signal were already near, their ships large, heavily armed, and intimidating. It was clear that this first encounter would not be simple. Yet, despite the fear, the crew felt a deep sense of responsibility. They had come to help, and they would not turn away now. The first signs of the enemy fleet appeared on the sensors, massive in size and projecting confidence and dominance. They did not expect humans to arrive. According to galactic intelligence, Earth was distant, technologically limited, and inexperienced. The aliens assumed that the humans would observe from afar, but not intervene. The reality, however, was very different. Humanity had sent its finest, its strongest, and its bravest, and they were about to challenge assumptions that had lasted for centuries. Commanders on the fleet coordinated carefully, sending out small scout units first to assess the enemy's numbers, formations, and weapon capabilities. The crew watched the data screens closely, interpreting every detail. Minor errors could mean disaster. Despite the pressure, humans demonstrated calm precision. Decisions were made quickly, adjusted when new information arrived, and executed flawlessly. The aliens observing from their ships could not understand how quickly and effectively the humans were reacting. They had underestimated both intelligence and adaptability. The first skirmish was unavoidable. A few smaller alien ships approached, likely seeking to probe the humans' capabilities. The humans responded with strategies that had been carefully planned, but executed with remarkable creativity and flexibility. They avoided unnecessary destruction while demonstrating strength and tactical skill. The enemy forces were surprised by the humans' coordination and decisiveness. Even their superior firepower was countered by innovative maneuvers that the aliens had not anticipated. It became evident that this was no ordinary fleet. It was a force guided by adaptability, courage, and careful planning. On board the ships, crews worked tirelessly. Pilots maneuvered through narrow passages between planets and asteroids. Engineers adjusted shields and propulsion systems in real time, and communication officers relayed critical information between units. The crew's training and discipline shone in these moments. Every individual understood that their actions mattered not just for the mission, but for the survival of the civilization they had come to protect. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it also strengthened their resolve. Fear was present, but it was focused and controlled, directed into action rather than panic. Even as the battle unfolded, moments of humanity persisted. Crew members encouraged one another, shared words of reassurance, and quietly celebrated small successes. When a shield system held against a direct strike or a maneuver prevented a collision, the relief and pride were palpable. These were not just machines in space. They were humans operating in extreme conditions, relying on intellect, skill, and empathy as much as any weapon or engine. The human element became the true strength of the fleet, a force that the enemy could neither predict nor understand. As the enemy assessed the humans, they became increasingly cautious. They had assumed the Earth species would be hesitant, uncoordinated, or easily intimidated. Instead, they found themselves facing crews that were disciplined, creative, and unwavering. Alien leaders realized that humanity's approach was unlike anything they had encountered before. Every move, every calculation, every decision reflected an understanding of both strategy and consequence. Humans were not acting recklessly. They were acting with purpose, intelligence, and courage. Meanwhile, the civilization sending the SOS watched in awe. They had spent years fearing that no one would come, that the universe had abandoned them. Now they saw ships unlike anything they had ever imagined, arriving with precision, strength, and determination. Though they had never met humans before, they felt a profound sense of hope. These newcomers were not just observers. They were protectors, ready to stand between them and the threat that had haunted their lives. For the first time, they believed survival was possible. Despite the tactical victories, the humans knew the fight was far from over. The enemy fleet was large and experienced, with technology that could cause massive destruction. Every decision had to balance aggression with caution. The humans demonstrated an uncanny ability to adapt on the fly, adjusting formations, shielding weaker vessels, and using the environment to their advantage. Asteroids, planetary magnetic fields, and orbital paths became tools rather than obstacles. The crew's ingenuity turned challenges into opportunities, and slowly, the momentum began to shift. Communication between the fleet's ships was constant, precise, and efficient. Every report, every suggestion, every observation was transmitted immediately, allowing the fleet to act as a single, coordinated entity. The human capacity for collaboration and teamwork became a force multiplier, amplifying the effectiveness of every vessel. The aliens, watching from their perspective, could only marvel and begin to question their previous assumptions about the species they had dismissed. Humans were proving to be more capable than anyone had believed possible. Even in the midst of battle, the humans did not lose sight of their purpose. They remembered the civilization they were protecting, the people who had sent the desperate signals into space. Every maneuver, every calculated risk, and every defensive action was taken with the goal of minimizing harm to those they had come to save. Unlike the enemy, who saw the conflict as an opportunity for conquest, the humans' focus was on protection. Their empathy, combined with skill, became their greatest advantage. The first major confrontation ended with a surprising outcome. The humans had managed to repel the initial wave of attacks, causing confusion among the enemy forces. The aggressors had expected hesitation, retreat, or disorganization. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that was precise, brave, and willing to act decisively. Even as the battle continued in pockets across the system, it became clear that humanity had changed the dynamics of the conflict. They had arrived when no one believed they would, and they were already altering the course of events. Inside the ships, the crew allowed themselves brief moments of relief. They knew the fight was far from over, but they also understood the significance of what they had achieved. Their planning, preparation, and courage had made a difference. Small celebrations, quiet smiles, and exchanged glances reflected the human side of the fleet. Despite the danger, despite the unknown, there was pride and a deep sense of accomplishment. They were not invincible, but they were formidable. Outside, alien civilizations observing the conflict began to shift their perspective. Whispers of disbelief turned into cautious respect. They had underestimated humans for centuries, assuming hesitation and weakness. Now they saw skill, bravery, and adaptability in action. The fleet's human crews were showing that intelligence, coordination, and empathy could be as powerful as technology or numbers. The unexpected arrival of Earth's fleet was already redefining how humans were perceived across the galaxy. For the civilization being saved, hope grew stronger with every passing hour. Humans had arrived when they were most needed, standing as a shield between them and a threat they could not have faced alone. Trust, once impossible, began to develop. They watched, listened, and slowly began to coordinate with the humans in small ways, offering information, pointing out threats, and sharing knowledge about their environment. The collaboration, though limited at first, symbolized the first steps toward a partnership that could ensure survival. The human fleet, despite exhaustion and tension, remained focused. Every crew member understood that the battle was ongoing. Vigilance, strategy, and courage were still required. They knew the enemy would adjust, would learn from mistakes, and would attempt to regain control. But the humans also knew something vital. They had changed expectations. The galaxy had assumed that Earth would hesitate, falter, or fail. Instead, humans had arrived and demonstrated that bravery, skill, and determination could overcome assumptions and create new possibilities. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, ready for the next phase of the confrontation, the sense of purpose was palpable. The crew was no longer just reacting to threats. They were shaping the battle, protecting the vulnerable, and demonstrating the extraordinary capacity of humans when faced with impossible challenges. The combi. The battle had been intense from the moment the human fleet arrived, but now the conflict escalated to a level that tested every skill, every system, and every ounce of courage within the fleet. The alien aggressors, having underestimated the humans once, now began to take them seriously. They unleashed more ships, more firepower, and more calculated strategies to break through the defenses and strike fear into the crews. It was a crucial moment. If humanity could hold and adapt, the civilization they came to protect had a real chance. If they faltered, all hope could be lost. Inside the fleet, tension was palpable. The crew worked around the clock, monitoring energy levels, repairing shields, and coordinating maneuvers. Every crew member knew their role, yet they also understood that flexibility was key. The unexpected could occur at any moment, and each person had to be ready to act independently while maintaining teamwork. Pilots communicated in short, precise bursts. Engineers anticipated failures before they happened, and commanders adjusted strategies based on real-time information. It was a dance of intelligence, courage, and discipline, each human playing a vital part. The alien forces tried to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers and aggression, but the humans had learned quickly. They used unconventional strategies, taking advantage of the terrain around planets and asteroids, moving in ways the enemy had not anticipated. They split into smaller units to outmaneuver the attackers, striking at weak points while protecting the vulnerable. It was not just technology that gave them an edge, it was adaptability, foresight, and a willingness to take calculated risks that the aliens had never considered. As the battle progressed, crew members on the ships faced moments of intense fear. Explosions rocked some vessels, alarms blared, and systems failed under the pressure of enemy attacks. Yet in each crisis, humans demonstrated something unique. They remained calm under pressure, thought quickly, and acted decisively. When a shield system failed mid-attack, engineers worked tirelessly to restore it while pilots maneuvered to avoid incoming fire. When communication arrays were damaged, crews improvised, using backup systems to coordinate and maintain cohesion. The human capacity to remain focused and creative under life-threatening stress became their greatest strength. The civilization being saved watched as the humans carried out maneuvers that seemed impossible. They had never imagined anyone would come, let alone with such skill and determination. Hope, which had long been buried under fear, now began to flourish. The humans demonstrated patience and precision, striking only where necessary, avoiding unnecessary destruction, and ensuring that the people and cities they came to protect remained intact. Every action inspired confidence, and for the first time in years, the endangered civilization felt they might survive this conflict. On board the human fleet, the sense of camaraderie grew stronger. Crew members supported one another, not just in their duties but emotionally. When a ship narrowly avoided destruction, the relief was shared, celebrated with quiet gestures, a nod, a brief smile, a word of encouragement. Even in the midst of chaos, small acts of humanity reminded everyone of why they were there. They were not just fighting a battle, they were defending life, protecting those who could not defend themselves, and proving to themselves and the galaxy what humans were capable of. As the battle reached a critical point, the humans executed a bold strategy. They concentrated their forces on key targets, using precise timing and coordinated attacks to disrupt the enemy's formation. The maneuver required absolute trust among the crews, perfect communication, and flawless execution. There was no room for hesitation. The first strike was successful, creating confusion and forcing the enemy to regroup. The humans had demonstrated that they could not only defend but also take initiative, altering the momentum of the battle in their favor. The alien aggressors, taken aback by the humans' decisiveness, responded with renewed aggression. They focused on areas where the humans had shown vulnerability, attempting to regain control. The humans, however, anticipated these moves, having analyzed potential responses in simulations and real-time observations. Engineers and strategists worked together to create adaptive solutions, rerouting energy to shields, adjusting weapons targeting, and reinforcing weaker vessels. Every action reflected a deep understanding of both strategy and technology, combined with the human ability to improvise under pressure. Throughout the battle, communication remained a lifeline. Crew members relayed information constantly, sharing observations, warnings, and tactical adjustments. Captains coordinated across ships, ensuring that no unit was isolated, no maneuver left unaccounted for. This level of teamwork was crucial, allowing the fleet to act as a single entity rather than individual vessels. The aliens had expected disorganization, hesitation, and panic. Instead, they encountered precision, discipline, and unity. The human fleet was demonstrating that coordination, trust, and courage could rival any technological advantage. The turning point came when the humans identified the enemy's central command vessels. These ships coordinated the attacks and provided support to the rest of the fleet. Taking control of them would disrupt the enemy's strategy and shift the balance of power. The plan was risky, requiring smaller human units to break through defensive lines, disable critical systems, and withdraw without catastrophic losses. Every crew member involved understood the stakes. Success could change the battle. Failure could be disastrous. Yet driven by purpose and skill, they executed the operation with precision. As the humans struck the command vessels, the enemy's coordination faltered. Confusion spread through their ranks and isolated ships became vulnerable. The humans capitalized on the chaos, pressing their advantage while protecting the civilization below. It was a careful balance of aggression and protection, a demonstration of strategy, courage, and empathy working together. The battle, once evenly matched, began to turn decisively in favor of humanity. Amidst the fighting, the human crews demonstrated resilience that inspired each other and the civilization they were saving. Even when individual ships were damaged or faced near destruction, the crews remained focused, repairing systems, supporting fellow ships, and continuing the fight. The human capacity for endurance and determination shone, proving that courage is not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. Every act of bravery, no matter how small, contributed to the larger victory. The alien aggressors began to recognize that humans were not just another species to be dismissed. They had arrived unexpectedly, acted decisively, and demonstrated qualities that challenged centuries of assumptions. Intelligence, adaptability, empathy, and courage were not traits they had anticipated. The human fleet, far from being a passive observer, had become a formidable force, capable of influencing the course of the battle and protecting a civilization that had almost lost hope. For the civilization being protected, the human actions were nothing short of miraculous. They witnessed coordinated strikes, protective maneuvers, and decisive actions that prevented destruction and loss of life. The humans did not simply fight, they shielded, guided, and inspired. Hope grew stronger with each successful maneuver, each display of skill, and each demonstration of courage. It became clear that survival was possible, and for the first time in years, the civilization believed it could endure the threat. As the battle continued, the human fleet maintained pressure, exploiting weaknesses and adapting to new challenges. Each crew member understood the importance of their role. Pilots maneuvered through dangerous zones, engineers repaired systems under fire, and strategists coordinated complex operations. The unity, intelligence, and courage of the humans turned a desperate situation into a possibility of victory. The enemy, facing unexpected resistance, began to withdraw from some areas, reassessing their assumptions about humanity. Even in moments of success, the humans remained vigilant. They knew the enemy could regroup and strike again. Exhaustion, stress, and uncertainty were constant companions, but they did not falter. Each human understood that the mission's success depended on continuous focus, adaptability, and the willingness to act decisively at every moment. Their determination, reinforced by shared purpose and trust in one another, became a defining feature of the fleet's effectiveness. By the end of the engagement, the humans had achieved a critical breakthrough. Key enemy ships were disabled, the endangered civilization was protected, and momentum had shifted decisively. The battle had tested every human skill, every ounce of courage, and every strategy. It had proven that humans were capable of rising to challenges that the galaxy had long believed were beyond their reach. The fleet, battered but resolute, had demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and empathy could be as powerful as technology or numbers. The aftermath was quiet, but filled with relief. Crew members checked systems, repaired minor damage, and confirmed the safety of the civilization below. Though exhausted, they felt pride, satisfaction, and the shared bond of having faced the unknown and prevailed. They had come to save lives, and they had succeeded. Humanity had not only met expectations, it had exceeded them, proving that courage, skill, and determination could change the course of events in ways no one anticipated. As the fleet prepared for the next phase, the battle had ended, but the work was far from over. The human fleet, though victorious, remained vigilant. Every crew member knew that even a single mistake could have consequences. Systems were checked, repairs were made, and communication lines were tested continuously. Exhaustion was everywhere, yet there was a shared determination to ensure that the civilization they had saved was completely secure. They had come to help, and their mission was not complete until the people they defended could feel safe. The civilization they had protected watched the humans with awe and gratitude. These strangers from a distant world had arrived when hope seemed lost, facing overwhelming odds with courage, intelligence, and precision. Cities that might have been destroyed were intact, vital resources remained untouched, and people could move freely once more. For the first time in many years, fear was replaced by hope. Families reunited, leaders regained confidence, and communities began to rebuild. The humans had not only defended lives, they had restored belief in a future. On board the fleet, the crew allowed themselves a moment of reflection. They had faced dangers no one on Earth had ever imagined. They had encountered forces far superior in technology and experience, yet they had prevailed through preparation, courage, and collaboration. Each human understood that the victory was not just due to the ship's weapons or systems, it was due to the human spirit. Ingenuity, empathy, and determination had carried them through the darkest hours. This realization created a quiet pride among the crew, one that went beyond words. The aliens who had watched the events unfold were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, dismissed as weak, passive observers, and unlikely participants in galactic affairs. Now they had arrived when no one expected it, demonstrated extraordinary skill, and defended another civilization against powerful enemies. The assumptions of countless leaders, strategists, and scholars were proven wrong. Humans had shown that courage, intelligence, and determination could challenge even the most formidable opponents. Respect, previously absent, now spread quietly across alien networks. The human fleet did not linger for glory or recognition. Their mission was to protect and ensure survival, and once that was achieved, they prepared to return. Crew members reflected on the journey, long months of travel, intense preparation, and unimaginable challenges. They remembered the moments of fear, the decisions that carried the weight of life and death, and the small acts of humanity that had made the difference. Every lesson learned, every bond formed, and every victory gained would stay with them forever, shaping the people they would become. The civilization they had saved began to reach out cautiously. Messages were sent expressing gratitude and curiosity. Humans responded carefully, establishing a foundation for communication and cooperation. The exchanges were tentative at first as both sides learned to trust one another. Humans shared knowledge and techniques for repair, navigation, and survival, helping to rebuild the systems damaged by conflict. In return, they learned about the civilization's culture, history, and technology. Slowly, understanding grew, bridging gaps between worlds and forging connections that had once seemed impossible. Back on Earth, the story of the fleet remained secret from most of humanity. Only a few leaders and strategists knew the full extent of what had occurred. Still, the impact was felt indirectly. The actions of the fleet became a symbol of what humanity could accomplish when united, disciplined, and courageous. The crew's success inspired confidence in ongoing exploration and defense initiatives. Plans for future missions were reconsidered, with the understanding that humans were capable of more than anyone had predicted. As the fleet journeyed home, the human crews reflected on their experiences. The challenges they had faced were immense, yet they had discovered strengths they had not known existed. Fear had been constant, yet courage had prevailed. Uncertainty had been ever-present, yet determination had guided every action. They realized that humanity's greatest power lay not in weapons or technology, but in the willingness to act when it mattered most. This lesson, learned in the vastness of space under extreme conditions, would shape the future of every human who had been involved. Even the crew members who were not on the front lines had grown through the mission. Engineers who repaired critical systems under fire, navigators who charted unknown paths, and strategists who calculated every move had discovered capabilities within themselves that would remain with them forever. Bonds formed under pressure became unbreakable. Friendships strengthened by shared experience and respect for one another deepened. The mission was not just about saving lives. It was about proving to themselves and the galaxy what humans could achieve together. The aliens who had attacked the civilization began to retreat. They had learned a lesson in humility and caution. They realized that humanity could not be underestimated and that encounters with Earth species required preparation, respect, and caution. Reports of human actions spread across neighboring systems. Where once humans had been dismissed as insignificant, they were now acknowledged as capable, strategic, and brave. The ripple effect of a single fleet's actions began to shape galactic perceptions, subtly shifting power dynamics and alliances. For the civilization that had been saved, the humans were no longer just visitors, they were heroes, allies, and symbols of hope. Communities began to recover, drawing confidence from the knowledge that they had been defended by beings willing to risk everything for life. Leaders emerged with renewed vision, families celebrated the chance to rebuild, and children grew up with stories of the humans who came across the stars when all seemed lost. The humans had not only changed a battle, they had altered the future of an entire world. On the fleet, reflection turned into planning. Lessons learned from the journey, from the battles, and from interactions with another civilization were carefully recorded. Systems were upgraded, strategies were refined, and training protocols were updated based on real experiences. Humans understood that one mission did not mark the end of exploration or defense, it was a beginning. There were other systems in need, other civilizations at risk, and the knowledge gained from this journey would guide future generations. The human fleet also carried a quiet pride. They had faced the unknown, confronted danger, and acted decisively. They had upheld values that defined humanity: courage, empathy, adaptability, and responsibility. Each crew member knew that their actions had made a difference, not just for a distant civilization, but for humanity's place in the universe. They had proven that when humans chose to act, they could rise above fear, overcome impossible odds, and redefine expectations. As Earth drew closer, the crew began to anticipate the return home. Yet even as they prepared to re-enter familiar space, they carried with them experiences that would remain forever. They had seen worlds under threat, navigated through impossible challenges, and interacted with beings whose lives depended on their courage. These experiences reshaped their understanding of responsibility, leadership, and the power of unity. Earth would receive them as heroes, but the true victory was in what they had learned and how they had grown as humans. The journey concluded with quiet relief and reflection. Crew members took time to process the events, to recognize the risks they had faced, and to appreciate the bonds formed under extraordinary circumstances. Every human aboard had contributed to a success that went beyond technology or strategy. It was a triumph of spirit, courage, and empathy. The fleet had proven that humans, when united by purpose and guided by morality, could achieve the impossible. The story of the fleet, though mostly hidden from the wider world, became a legend among those who had witnessed it firsthand. It was not about glory, fame, or conquest. It was about acting when it mattered, standing up for those in need, and demonstrating that courage and empathy were as important as power or technology. The humans had arrived when no one expected, fought with skill and bravery, and ensured survival for another civilization. And as the ship settled back into Earth's orbit, the crew looked at their home planet with a new understanding. They had ventured into the unknown, faced dangers unimaginable, and returned not only victorious but changed. Humanity had proven something to itself and to the galaxy, that it was capable of extraordinary courage, intelligence, and compassion. That Earth's species, often underestimated, could rise to challenges no one thought possible. That when humans chose to act, the universe itself took notice. The fleet disbanded, crews returned to their lives, and the world continued as it always had, though quietly forever changed. Lessons, bonds, and experiences remained, shaping the future in subtle but profound ways. The humans who had journeyed across the stars carried memories, wisdom, and a sense of responsibility that would influence generations. And somewhere across the galaxy, the civilization they saved flourished, forever grateful, forever changed by the unexpected arrival of Earth's mightiest fleet. The story was not just of a battle, it was of courage, empathy, and humanity itself. It was a reminder that action matters, that hope can be restored, and that even the most underestimated beings can change the course of history. The humans had arrived, had acted, and had proven that while